Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. On the eve of the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947, the movie begins with a small girl named Mary Lennox, playing in her chamber with her doll Jemima. Later that night, the housekeepers abandoned Mary in the house, after the cholera outbreak, which killed her parents and she became an orphan. Mary wakes up the next morning, oblivious to what has happened, and summons her nanny. Since no one responds, she carefully steps out of her room, and discovers the house has been trashed. She calls her parents and helpers, but there is no one in the house. She is startled when she hears gunfire. As a result, she decides to stay inside. She spends the following few days in the house, surviving by eating whatever she can find edible. One day, while going around the house, she comes upon a police officer. He rushes her to the governor, and notifies him of Mary's predicament. When the governor informs him that Mary cannot stay, the officer informs him of her uncle, who resides in England. They decide to send her and the other children back to England. A few days later, the officials finalize her travel plans, and she boards a ship. Once inside, the crew began feeding them. Mary finds the food terrible and wants better, only to have her food snatched away by another kid. She quickly understands that she is no longer fortunate. When she arrives in England, she is met by Mrs. Medlock, a lady who works for her uncle, Lord Archibald Craven. She tells Mary not to anticipate any luxury, because the soldiers destroyed her uncle's Misselthwaite home during the war. Mary does not appear to be affected by any of it. Mrs. Medlock warns her about her uncle, who is a severe man having a difficult day recently, and advises her to keep away from him. Mrs. Medlock informs her that her uncle is living alone after the death of his wife, Grace, who is Mary's mother Alice's twin sister, and advises her to stay in her room, and not explore the house. Mary stays inside, fantasizing about running outside her old house in India. She attempted to draw her mother Alice's attention, but she never looked. She hears screams around midnight, and exits her room, but finds nothing. The next morning, she discovers Craven throwing away a few items. She encounters Martha, who has come to give her food. She questions Martha about the shrieking noises, but she says it's only the wind. Mary claims that her maids took good care of her in their residence in India, but here is different. However, Martha tells that she is not her servant. When Mary realizes she is served porridge, she becomes enraged and taunts Martha. Martha is taken aback when she discovers Mary didn't know how to dress. She ultimately gets dressed with her assistants, and walks out of her room. Mary overhears her uncle talking with Mrs. Medlock, about removing anything that reminds him of his late wife Grace. She then goes out to play in the field. She is eating lunch when she comes across a stray dog, and becomes terrified. She attempts to shoo the dog away, but quickly changes her mind, and attempts to track it down before it becomes lost in the woods. Mrs. Medlock summons her immediately, and warns her to remain in her room. She recalls playing at home and attempting to attract her mother's attention, but she directs their maid to look after Mary, so she doesn't bother her. Mary hears the screaming sounds again in the middle of the night. The next morning, she asks Martha if the troops died in the house, because she believes the screams are coming from the house's haunted dead soldiers. But Martha walks away without saying anything. She subsequently returns to the field in search of the stray dog. She names the dog, presuming it's a girl, Jemima. She follows it around, until it runs into a wall for pleasure. She is abruptly summoned back to the house, and hears the screaming sound again later that night, and goes to investigate. She meets Craven's son, Colin, who is sick. They quickly understand that they are cousins, because their mothers were sisters. When she wonders if the house is cursed, because of the dead troops, Colin admits that the curse existed prior to the war, because it killed his mother and attempted to kill him. Mary dreams about playing with her father that night. Martha wakes her up the next morning, because her uncle Craven wants to visit her. Mrs. Medlock arrives to take Mary to Craven, and Martha quickly dresses her up. Mary tells him she likes the estate, and dismisses Craven's offer to get her a governess, since she believes there is too much to learn in the mansion. He dislikes Mary's presence in the house and her appearance, since she reminds him too much of his wife. He threatens to send her to a boarding school if she continues to cause trouble. She goes out to the field to play with Jemima, until they become separated in a fog, at which point she discovers the dog's paw hooked in a bear trap. She frees Jemima, who then flees with a swollen paw. She pursues Jemima until she reaches the wall, and scales the wall, discovering the secret garden. She wanders around till she runs into Jemima again. She considers it a mysterious location. She then finds a robin, who guides her to a stone monument with a key to the garden. She informs Jemima that she will return tomorrow to inspect that limb when Mrs. Medlock summons her. Mary is chastised for having filth all over her body. She takes a bath, and looks over the key. Later, she pays another visit to Colin, and tries to persuade him to leave his chamber. However, he informs her that his hunchback has worsened, and he is unable to walk. Mary suggests he go outside, since it will make him feel better. Colin recalls stepping outside, and nearly being killed by the overpowering smell of flowers. She then mentions the enchanted garden to him, but he is uninterested. While leaving, she discovers a photograph of his mother, and Colin declares that he will never forgive his mother for dying and abandoning him. He then requests that Mary read him a story that his mother used to read to him. On her way back to her room, she comes upon two women laughing and playing in a room in the corner. Later, she enters a room in search of her Aunt Grace's old clothing. She wears one of her pearl necklaces, and experiments with her aunt's clothes. She also discovers a photograph of Grace and Alice together, and inquires about Grace, claiming that her mother never spoke about life in England. According to Martha, the two sisters were thick as thieves, and the mansion used to host balls. Martha also recalls the sisters sobbing when it was revealed that Mary's father had been posted to India. Mary recognizes her mother and aunt as the people she saw last night. They were reunited after death, and playing around the house. Martha admits that her mother was unable to cope with her sister's death, and never recovered. She has another flashback, in which her mother used to ignore her, and her father took her away after her mother became too ill to see her, and Mary wished she had died already. She feels horrible for what her mother must have gone through. She returns to the garden in search of Jemima, where she meets Dickon, Martha's brother, who informs her that Jemima is a boy dog, and offers her assistance in treating him. She brings him to the secret garden, and returns to where she left the dog the day before. They locate the dog, and discover that its wound has gotten worse. Dickon walks the dog to a nearby lake to disinfect its wound, before bandaging it. They call the dog Hector. Mary thinks the garden will work its magic and heal him, and Hector lies down in the grass to heal. She tells Colin about it later, and this time he becomes excited. She proposes he get out of bed, and be wheeled into the chamber she discovered the previous night. He becomes overwhelmed, and asks to be taken back to his room. When she tries to get him to look closer at a photograph of their mothers, they are taken into their mother's memories, where they see themselves as children playing in the secret garden. He feels outraged, believing her deception is motivated by envy over his mother's preference for him over hers. Mary lifts him back up and sends him to his room after he slips out of his chair. The next morning, she discovers Hector in good health, and informs Dickon that it was the magical garden that healed him. She and Dickon play in the garden, where they imagine huge flowers sprouting. When they reach the wall, Robin reappears and reveals the lock, with Mary holding the key. They decide to pay a visit to Colin, who is still upset with Mary, and refuses to leave his room. But he changes his mind after Mary warns him he will die watching a wallpaper. They both successfully get him out of the mansion, and she drives him to the garden, in the hope that it may heal him. Colin is charmed as they walk through the garden wall and see how beautiful everything is, despite his initial trepidation. They have fun with Hector by the lake, but the fun is quickly ruined when Mrs. Medlock comes looking for Mary, after finding she stole her aunt's pearl jewelry. She is returned to Craven, who informs her that she will be sent to a boarding school. Mrs. Medlock leads Mary to her room, and locks the door behind her. Mary lets out her wrath on the rocking horse, and discovers letters from her mother to her Aunt Grace. She runs into the garden with the mail. She arrives near a tree specified by her aunt in the letter, and informs Dickon that her Aunt Grace knew she was dying, and that her mother came to be with her in her final days. Grace intended to die beneath the tree, but her uncle forbade her from entering the garden, because the memories of her were too traumatic. Mary believes her aunt's garden may cure her son, and she believes she must do so before she is sent to boarding school. As they begin to make plans to ship Mary away, she runs out into the garden with Colin and Dickon. She leads Colin to the tree where his mother died, where he pays his respects, planting flowers. She informs him that this location, just like Hector, has the ability to cure him, but he chooses to leave. She sees her mother's vision while reading the letters that night. She arrives at the flashback, where her father informs her that her mother was sad at the time, and that her unhappiness had caused her to get ill, and he believes it is not her mother's fault. Mary apologizes to her mother for her misunderstanding. When she walks into Colin's room, she is surprised to see him standing up, and fainting. He asks whether they want to read those letters, and they both chuckle. Mrs. Medlock shows Mary the uniform, and assures her that the car would drop her off for school early the next morning. Just thereafter, Craven passes by, and she confronts him about Colin, saying he is exacerbating his son's condition, and asks what his wife would have wanted. Craven attempts to light a candle in his office, but spills the flame. When the youngsters playing in the garden notice the black smoke coming from the house, they hurry towards it. Mary goes in search of Craven, while he goes in search of Colin. She informs him that Colin is outside. The flames grow stronger as they run away. Craven exhausts himself and gives up. Just then, his wife Grace helps him to his feet, and they are directed by Grace and Alice's vision. They soon arrive downstairs, and Mary recognizes her mother Alice. Alice kisses her daughter, and apologizes for not knowing how unwell she was. After Mary and Craven safely exit the house, she takes Craven to Colin, who learns to walk on his own. Craven embraces his son, and apologizes profusely. He continues to rebuild the house, while Mary continues to have fun in the garden with Colin, Dickon and Hector. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.